What's up? Prinston Hicks coming to you from the Cineverse. I'm out here at the downtown aquarium today. And what I want to talk about today is a concept that stops a lot of people from progressing when it comes to life. So let me ask you something, a simple question, and be honest with me. Be very honest with me, because if you lie to yourself, that's when you're really not going to see progress from what I'm going to tell you in this video. Have you ever got to a point where you felt maybe insecure when you get around people? So maybe somebody has more wealth than you, more fame, more knowledge, and you feel insecure. Or maybe you have chronic bouts of just loss of motivation and just feeling like you're not accomplishing the things that you want in life. Well, if you ever had anything like this, and I definitely have had that myself, then what I want to talk about this video is something I like to call ego instability, and how overcoming it can lead to massive amounts of success in your life, in business, just in all areas. So let's talk about it. So starting this video off, something crazy just happened. They told us we couldn't film over inside the aquarium.
I'm not gonna let y'all can't film because it's very important that y'all don't film.
But once again, ego would have stopped me from filming this video. I'd have been like, oh, I'm pissed off now. I'm not gonna do it. But anyway, let me get into the story I want to tell you. So I want you to first start off imagining that you get a $100,000 a year job. You might feel pretty good about yourself right now. You went from, say, making $20,000 a year to making $100,000 a year. Anybody would love that type of giant leap. Now you feel like you have enough money, you have enough success, and even you're starting to get in the company of people that will push you to the next level. But then what happens? You go to a party or you go to an event and the people there are making $200,000 a year. Some of the people there are making $500,000 a year. Hell, some of the people there are making $1 million a year. And then slowly what starts to happen? You start feeling a little bit insecure about the $100,000 you made. But when you were making $20,000, all you wanted to do is get to that level where you made $100,000. And this is an example of classic ego instability. And it's basically you basing your identity or your ego on external things that you cannot control. If we take the example of money, like I just did, you would see that no matter how much money you make, there's always going to be somebody who's making more money. The same thing goes to knowledge. Then same thing goes for wealth. Same thing goes for any area in your life that you think you're good at. There's always going to be somebody that you can find that can be better. And as a result of you feeling like people are better, your ego's gonna always drop. You're always gonna feel like you lost motivation, like something's holding you back, or some way that you can't get to the next level, or there's always a need to get more because you have classic ego instability. And this is one of the topics that I found to be one of the most pressing things when it comes to entrepreneurship. If you're starting from nothing, if you're starting from the bottom, it's gonna be hard for you to base your ego on things like, oh, I have the best product, or oh, I have the best content, or anything of this nature, because of course you haven't been doing as long as other people. It's like playing a sport. If you started off playing a basketball or soccer or something that you don't play right now, and you try to go play against an all-star or a pro, of course you're gonna get smashed, you're gonna get demolished because you're just not at the level of them. So even comparing yourself to them is gonna be a fallacy in your head, because you're never gonna amount to them because you're not even looking at them in the real context. Another huge concept is ego instability is the comparison. The comparison that you make to others around you. So just like in the first example, I talked about comparing yourself with money, but also comparing yourself in skill level, which the big basis that I want you to get here is that anytime that you base your ego on anything external, you're never going to be able to have a stable set point for your ego. I want to tell you a story about the first time I ever dealt with a millionaire when it came to closing business. Now, a friend of mine, he actually does water. He produces water, like, you know, the pH level water, the alkaline type water. And I was working with him on marketing, and he wanted me to help him with a project. He was working with a big distributor of like bottles that makes the bottles, like all the bottles in this area, he makes them. So you've ever seen like the Nestle bottles or the Ozarka bottles or any type of bottles that are produced down here, he's actually the person who makes the bottles. So he called me up one day out the blue. I wasn't prepared at all. And he said, hey, look, I got this guy. He wants to meet you. I want you to come over here right now. I want you to give him a presentation, a sales presentation about what you do and what you're trying to do. Now, of course, this is the first time, especially think about it, I'm sleeping on my mother's floor. If you're coming from sleeping on your mother's floor, going into a room with people who are literal millionaires, of course, my ego right at that point was like, huh, shit, I'm not on the level of these people. How could I possibly tell this person something that they would appreciate or something that they could actually use or be of value to them?
There may be a lot of Goliaths out there, people who you think are just massive and you cannot beat. That's because you're trying to plan the game on their playing field. Now, if David would have tried to go hand-to-hand combat with Goliath, Goliath would have whooped his ass. But he used his slingshot, he used his wit, he used his speed, his agility, and that's what you have to do when you're doing your business. Man's like a movie.
But then, in that moment, I had one of the biggest realizations about ego instability that I've had my entire time in entrepreneurship. See, the thing that I realized was that it's more important to always show up. But let me expand that a little bit further. There's only a certain set of things that you can focus on in any given situation. So for example, in that situation, I couldn't focus on that, oh, I had as much money, maybe even much knowledge or as experience. But what I could focus on was the things that I could control. So what I did was exactly that. I went up to the office. I didn't have any presentation material in my hand, and me and him began a conversation. So he sat down at the desk and he looked over at the desk at me. He started giving me like, the eye, like staring you deep in your soul to try to kind of intimidate you. So he asked me one question. He said, so let me ask you, how long have you been doing this? So instead of giving some type of like jumping to it and be like, oh, well, I've been doing it this many years and all this type of, I sat back in the chair, I kept my composure, focusing only on the things I could control, and told him all that I had to offer. I said, look, I've been doing this for about 4 or 5, no, it was about 6 or 7 years at that point. And before I stopped, I said, but right now, I'm really just starting to get a hold of or get a grasp of how the whole entrepreneurship thing works. He sat back, he cracked a smile, he looked at me, said, it's like at a certain point, you just find the key. And since then, he fell in love with me. He was like, yeah, man, anytime you want to come back, you want to work here, you want to be a part of anything I'm doing, you can come back. But it wasn't because I had the best product. It wasn't because I had the best talking skills or sales points. It wasn't because I had the most money or a well-renowned reputation. It was because I focused on the things that I can control. And by focusing on the things I could control, I didn't let my ego waver, which led to me being able to close a deal with no presentation material in my hand. And this is one of the biggest things you got to realize about ego instability. It's one of those things that if you can't control your ego based on things that are external, then you're never going to be able to be motivated, or anytime you get around other people, you're going to feel insecure. I talked about ego instability, I've talked about the causes, and I've actually even gave some examples of what ego instability is. But what I'm talking about now is how you can specifically learn to get over ego instability, and I hinted at it earlier. But the biggest thing that you have to understand when it comes to your ego is that it's based on something that you call absence blindness. Now, what this is the ability to focus on things that are not there instead of things that are there. So for example, I came and I started talking about a situation that's going on in your life. Your mind would basically start focusing on those things. This is based on another system called the reticular activating system, which is selective focus. So, when you get a car or you're thinking about getting a car, you start seeing that car everywhere. That's your selective focus. It's actually bringing that car into your awareness. Now, absence blindness and these two things, absence blindness and your reticular activating system, they work together in order to make sure that whatever you focus on, that gets amplified. So, for example, if you get around somebody who has more money than you, if you get around somebody who has more wealth than you, if you get around somebody who has more knowledge than you, then you're going to focus on that. You're going to focus on all those qualities that you feel like you don't have, instead of focusing on the qualities that you might have over them. What a concept, right? And that's what allowed me to go in there and talk to the millionaire, the first millionaire I ever met, a guy who owns like 4 plants across the world, without feeling like I was beneath him or above him. See, it's not about being above, it's not about being beneath, it's not about being superior, it's not about any of those things. It's about understanding that your ego, and this is the main point. If you don't take anything else from this video, this is the main point that I want you to remember. Anytime that your ego, your identity, is based on some external factor, it's always going to be subject to being crushed, changed, or your mood can go down, your state can go down. So for example, let's say, like you're talking about motivation or whatever, right? You wake up and you say, man, I'm not motivated to work. That's because you're dependent on motivation, because you feel like, oh, I have to get to this point. And I have to get to this point for what? Why? Why do you really want to get to that point? Why do you want to have more money? Why do you want to have more people in your life? Why do you want better social circle? All these things lead to what? You feeling like, oh, I'm not enough, it's inadequate, or your ego not feeling like it's where it's supposed to be. However, if you focus your awareness, and this is the big thing, if you shift your awareness only on things that you can control, then you have the ability to make your ego a more static thing. And I want to send a disclaimer real quick. You'll never be able to 100% get over ego, because there's 2 other traps that you can fall into when it comes to your ego. And these are the 2 biggest ego traps. Now, the first one is, once you feel like you've gotten over your ego, then you build an ego about not having ego. So you may see these people who be like, oh yeah, it's funny how people are so stuck in their ego. So I don't give a shit. See me, I don't care. I don't care what other people think about me, which is still a form of ego because now you're trying to act superior to the people who you feel like are stuck in their ego. And the other one is what I call moral victory syndrome. Now, I remember Jay-Z said in the lyric, he said, moral victories are for minor league coaches. Now, when you say this and you say, oh, you shift your awareness to just things you can control. So this is things like, oh, I'm gonna do my absolute best. I'm not gonna focus on, say for example, that I'm the best speaker. I'm gonna focus that I work harder. But the moral victory can come in as, well, at least I tried, right? At least I gave it 110%. Well, shifting this focus away from the things that you can't control just means that you go harder in the things that you can control. So for example, right now, me and Will, we're out here every week. We get out here and film. It's hot. Somebody just kicked us off the aquarium parking lot because they said we couldn't film there. But we still get it done. We don't make any excuse, so we just go harder. So we don't think we're gonna win, or I don't think I'm gonna win because, oh, I'm the most talented, I'm the best, or I'm the smartest. I think I'm gonna win because I'm gonna put in the most work. I've literally worked one time in my life, 3 days straight, until hallucination. Until I was literally walking into the living room and I was seeing like black shit walking around. Like, this is a true story. As soon as I saw that, I immediately had to go to sleep. But the whole point is, if nobody's gonna outwork you, if you put your awareness in things that you can control, that's something that's more stable because that's something that somebody else can't take away from you. As soon as somebody gets more money, be taken away from you. As soon as somebody comes around you and they have more than you, your ego is going to drop. You're gonna start feeling insecure because you feel like you don't have what they have. And that's the biggest thing you gotta remember with ego instability. Conquering ego instability is gonna allow you to have a lot more confidence in life. It's gonna allow you to walk around the world a lot more carefree because you're not focusing on what everybody else is thinking of you. To wrap this up, I want you to remember what ego instability is. So basically, anytime that you're basing your identity on external factors that are outside of your own control, you're always subject to rapid change in moods, loss of motivation, and of course, insecurity. Now, remember those big things because this is one of the things that holds you back when it comes to just getting out there and attempting to do something. So for example, if you wanna go tackle a big challenge in life, if you feel insecure about it, guess what's gonna happen? You're not gonna go after it. And mastering this ego and learning to get it under control is gonna be one of the biggest things you ever do in business. I still struggle with it all the time. I'm not perfect with any of this stuff, but I always try to use these type of mindsets and mentalities to help me deal with the never-ending set of problems or ego-based problems that come up in your life. So finally, I wanna leave you with your massive action challenge of the week. Now this one requires going deep, thinking about yourself very deeply. I want you to look at somebody that you really admire, somebody you think is successful. So no matter what field you're in, whatever it is that you do right now, I want you to look at somebody in that same field or doing something similar, and I want you to look at things that you admire about that person. But then I want you to take it a step further and look at ways that you have advantages over them. Write down at least 5 ways that you have advantages over them that they don't have and that you have. So for example, say you look at somebody who's a very good speaker. You may look at their story and say, man, their story is so compelling or captivating. But what points about your story do you have that people would like to hear that you could use? So for example, you may come from a background that that person doesn't come from. You may have an upbringing. You may have some insight, some perspective. You may have something that they simply do not have that you can bring to the table and you can use to tell your story in a compelling way that's going to bring people to your cause or whatever you're doing. So I wanted to leave you with that this week. And of course, join the Massive Action Movement. Like and subscribe for more. It's Massive Action. It's week 8. We keep it going. We're here behind the camera. Let's go. Massive Action Movement.
Massive action break. Massive. Oh, wait. I know you're wondering. Where we win?